So you should have gone through and taken a look at JavaScript again. And you should also become familiar with some of the new features of ECMAScript 2015 and beyond. So those are the knowledge requirements to be successful with this demo. So what are we doing today? We're going to go over how to set up a simple Node project in Visual Studio Code and how to create a small Node.js server. That's really it. We're going to make this pretty quick, this one, and I'm going to follow some of the code examples up online. Let's do this. So again, here we're at our Node.js.org website, and this is where you should have already installed the latest version of Node. In the installation PowerPoint slides you may have seen, or even the course material, you may have seen a different version of Node that was being installed at the time, because Node is quickly evolving, and you're going to see that our current version, as an example, which is the latest bleeding edge version 14.9.0, they may have been a different version, and in future iterations of this course you may see that it's way beyond 14.9.0. So that is continually improving. They're evolving Node at a very rapid rate. So the version numbers you might see here are different, but the installation will be very similar to what we're doing. We're going to follow the documentation for this one. So here what we have is there are some guides. Right? If you look at guides, there's the first one that I'd like you to try and look at is the Getting Started guide. The Getting Started guide gives us a very simple template for how to set up a Node server. So let's try and make this all work. Okay, first of all, we're going to start off with a folder. So again, I've brought up our little folder here on my desktop for COM229. We're going to involve all of our videos here. So I'm just going to install a new folder. And I'm going to call this Week 2. Because this is where we are right now. We're welcome to Week 2. Under Week 2, I'm going to drag and drop this folder onto our Visual Studio Code. So let's open up Visual Studio Code here. And you might have some other project that you were running with, like me. That's okay. Or not, if you're new. And I'm just going to drag Week 2 into Visual Studio Code. Again, I'm using Visual Studio Code on a Windows 10 machine. If you're running Visual Studio Code on a Mac or a Linux machine, it may appear different to you. Now that I'm in Visual Studio Code, one thing to notice is, for those people who haven't used Visual Studio Code as often, that on the top left, you can see that there is the name of the week. This is important. There's no other folders in here. I'm going to add a new folder, and we're going to just call this folder Scripts. So any new scripts, we want them to be in here typically. When we set up a page, as an example, here we're going to eventually split out our scripts into different places. For now, this folder is going to remain empty for us, and I'm going to make a new file here outside of the scripts folder, and we're just going to call this our index.js file. Okay, so this is kind of the first step. Whenever we install anything with Node, a lot of times what we want to do is we want to strike up our package.json file. So that's another thing we want to do. But in order for us to do this, there is a batch wizard that NPM allows us to use. So let me just do that. I'm going to press Control and backtick on my keyboard. Control backtick is the key underneath the escape key on most keyboards. Control backtick, or bring up our little terminal, our integrated terminal. Again, the assumptions are that you've already installed many of the default applications that I've asked you to install. Alternatively, you can always go to the terminal menu item, and you can select new terminal. That would do it as well. But here we are in our terminal, and what I want to do first is I want to use npm to initialize our project. So I'm going to say npm init, and what this does again is it brings up our little a little wizard that's going to create our package.json file for us. So I'm going to start typing some stuff. Now it's going to ask you some questions. Package name. We can leave it alone if you want. I want to leave it at Week 2. So you can press enter. Yeah, actually you can press enter the entire way through, and it'll be totally fine. Version 1 is fine. Our description is a demo for Week 2, if I can type. And then our entry point is our index.js. We have index.js, so this is perfect. And then our test command, we're not going to include one right now. Our Git repository, we don't have a Git repository that we've established yet, so we're going to leave that empty. keywords, we can add keywords if we're making a new npm package, but we're not doing that. Author, you put your name in here. I'm going to leave this blank for now. And license, just kind of leave it in. So notice it made a little scaffold of a JSON file. It hasn't done it yet until we press enter. So this is going to create our package.json. You can see that right away our package.json file has been created with some defaults. Now this is important to establish now, and we're going to build on this as we go forward week over week. We're going to do this a couple of times, but for now you can see this little package.json file in here. We're probably not going to use it at this point. I just wanted to go through how to install or create a package.json file, because that's part of what we do with npm and Node. All right, I'm going to clear the screen, so I'm going to press CLS for clearing the screen here in our terminal. And you're going to notice this is a little bit terminal heavy. This whole course is more terminal heavy or command prompt heavy than other courses that you may have been used to in the past. Okay, so here I am in our week 2, and now for the next piece, I want to take some of that example code that we have online. So I'm going to go back into our Node.js. I'm just going to copy all this stuff and just populate it inside of our index.js. There we go. And I'm going to save it. So let's go over what this all does. Again, you can see that we're using a new const keyword. Const means constant. That didn't exist in the previous versions of JavaScript. Now it does. And we're setting up this require. We're using require.js here. This is the new module pattern that we're using with JavaScript. We're setting our host name to 127.0.0.1. That is localhost for most systems. And our port name, our port number, we can change this port number to wherever we want, but for now it's port 3000. We're creating a new server object. That's what it does. And we're using the factory pattern, which is what this is, the HTTP built-in npm package. And there's a lot of built-in packages that come with npm. Here, when we require it, we're not actually downloading and installing anything new from npm. All we're doing is we're activating the HTTP package. That's what we're doing. And so here we're using the HTTP package, and we're using the create server function, right? And we're passing in a request response object here. That's what we're doing. Fat arrow notation. If the assumption is that you've done some ECMAScript 2015 and beyond, you know that this is equivalent, this pattern here is equivalent to function, just the word keyword function. If I was going to rewrite it, it could be rewritten like this. And I can just get rid of this. This is the older way that you might see it being written. It's the same thing. Fat arrow functions have other advantages that we talked about. So a request response object, those are the things that are part of the parameters. And then we can see that the response, so the way Node.js works is it's event driven. So what's going to happen is the response object is what's going to come back from the little server that we're building here to the user. So you see that the status code is 200. Status code 200 means generally OK. Some headers that we're going to establish here, as well as a message that's going to come to the user that's going to say hello world. We should probably make this a regular hello world. I think the classic hello world would be hello world. And that is us creating the server object. So the server object is created by using the HTTP class and using the create server method of that class to create the server object. And if you hover over here, you see if I'm hovering over with my mouse, Visual Studio Code is smart enough to detect that it is indeed a server type. That's the data type that we're making, a new server object. So now that the server object is created, if I just stop there, it wouldn't do anything. We actually have to use the listen method of the server object to listen for an event, any kind of access to the server at this particular address and port. Once we have a request coming forward, for example, if a user goes to his browser and puts in this address, and we're going to do that in a second, we want to respond just like any other event with some kind of console response for now. And this is it. This is our little server. Now, how do I launch this server? There's a couple ways to do this. The first way of doing this is just typing in the words node and then index.js. That is the basic way. And you can see now here I'm running the server at 8127.0.0.1. That's the address and the port number. And for me to run this, I'm going to bring up our web browser and just type that in. So I type in localhost 3000, and then we're going to get hello world. Okay. Notice that I didn't really get what I wanted. I got hello world without it. Why? Because I forgot to save. Let's try this again. And you might be forgiven to think that if I save it and if I go back and refresh, that things are good. But actually, one thing to note is that this will never change unless I restart my server. So every time I make a change to any of the files, one of the key learnings from today is you need to always restart your server. So that's a bit of a pain. I have to press Control-C to stop my server, Control-C, and then I have to launch it again with a command like Node, right? And now if I go back and I refresh, you can see that that is the workflow I could use. You can see that that has changed now to hello world, the way I wanted it. It's not a great workflow, and there's a better tool out there for us that we can use. So I'm going to install something called NodeMon, which is something we're going to be using for the entire course for the most part until we get into our own other ways of doing things. So how to do this? What is NodeMon? So I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to use the npm command to install NodeMon. I'm going to install it globally on your system. And again, if you're using a Mac, you need to probably need to use sudo. If you're using, or Linux, if you're using a Windows machine like me, it's probably good enough to do npm install -g for global, and then the package name, NodeMon. And if I press enter, it's going to install this on my system. Now, it may not work in your Visual Studio Code. You may have to do it in command prompt, and if that's the case, if you're getting an error here, it's because you haven't completed the installation properly. See me during week 2 or your instructor, and we can talk about how to fix this problem during our one-on-one sessions. Here in my case it worked. So now I've installed NodeMon, and it's the latest version you can see is 2.0.4. I'm just going to clear the screen again, and I'm going to just type in the words NodeMon. Now for NodeMon to work, index.js has got to be exposed at the root of your project. It can't be hidden inside of a scripts folder like this. I just made this little package structure just for you. So I'm going to type in the word NodeMon just by itself and press enter. And then what you notice is that, well, this is pretty cool, right? It's kind of put off our little server, but you can see that the server is running at 127.0.0.1.3000, just like before. And if I go back and refresh, you can see that there's no changes. But the great thing about NodeMon is if I change this to something like goodbye world, right? Goodbye, let's say cruel world, right? Let's say goodbye cruel world. It's a little bit changed. And as soon as I save it, notice down here what's going to happen. I save this, and all of a sudden it restarts the server for me. And if I go back and refresh, then we're good to go. Right? So that's kind of a good workflow, and that's why we're going to be using NodeMon for the remainder of the semester. We're going to be using NodeMon. So this is great. It's fantastic. Again, but it's such a simple example that we put together, and it's right through the npm or Node website. So this is all I wanted you guys to try for today. So a couple things we went over just as a recap. We talked about how to use Visual Studio. We discussed how to, kind of copy paste our details from the website. We really didn't do much, but this is a great example of how Node works. Node is a little server that will run and be waiting for your requests to come through at this point. There are a ton of different things you can do with Node. For example, you can use the file system module. You can use all kinds of modules, and the LinkedIn Learning resources that we've pointed to, there's a great number of resources to know more about what you need to do. But suffice it to say, all you need for today is just to be able to do this. If you can get this working on your system, you're well on your way to what we're going to be doing this semester. Anyways, that's it for me for today. We'll get back to another short video about Express next week. Thank you.